The movie begins on December 13th, 1937, in Nanking, China. Amid the chaos of war between the Chinese and Japanese, three girls are desperately fleeing for their lives. The air is thick with fog from the relentless bombing. Japanese soldiers show no mercy, leading to the deaths of many civilians. Even students trying to hide beneath heavy bags are hunted down and killed by the soldiers. Amid the turmoil, Western mortician John Miller is on the run. Seeking refuge in a dilapidated factory, he falls into a pile of dust. A Japanese soldier thrusts his bayonet into the dust, but finds no blood and moves on. John tries to escape but is stopped by the soldier, who demands he turn around. Unbeknownst to the soldier, the wall behind him is about to collapse. When it does, John hides in a small tunnel, encountering two young girls. He introduces himself in English, but they don't understand. Desperate, he asks about Winchester Cathedral, explaining he needs to bury Father Engelman. One girl reveals they are from the convent. Meanwhile, Chinese soldiers are also fighting fiercely to protect their people. They use snipers to pick off Japanese soldiers who are pursuing fleeing Chinese civilians. These brave soldiers create a precarious but vital safe passage for their fellow countrymen amidst the ongoing chaos and violence. As civilians escape, the remaining Chinese soldiers clash with Japanese forces in deadly battles. A Japanese tank decimates the Chinese troops, leading to their defeat. Amidst the chaos, Major Li heroically rescues his gravely wounded comrade, Pu Sheng, and they take refuge near the church. At the church, John holds the hands of the two girls, hoping their association with the church will protect them. Inside, they meet George Chen, the young caretaker, who explains the tragic fate of Father Engelman. The priest's body lies in pieces in a large pit, a grim testament to the war's horrors. Meanwhile, the students are gathered at the altar, crying and praying. Tensions rise among them, leading to a fight and mutual blame. John and George intervene, managing to stop the altercation between the two girls. George reveals that they are the only ones left because their cook, Gu, escaped. John is disappointed, realizing his primary reason for coming is futile. George pleads with John to stay, but John, concerned about money, searches the church for hidden cash, finding nothing. Feeling defeated, John decides to rest in the priest's bedroom, treating himself like a boss in the process. Outside the church, a group of wealthy young women gathers, trying to force their way in. They insist on entry because they have an arrangement with Gu. The women reveal themselves to be prostitutes from the Qinhuai River. George firmly refuses to let them in, explaining that Gu is no longer there to honor any agreements. Ignoring his objections, the determined women toss their luggage over the church wall and scale it to get inside. George tries to stop them, but his efforts are in vain. The students and John, watching from a window, are taken aback by the scene. John, perched at the top window, engages in playful banter with the women. That night, the women take refuge in the cellar, their loud voices and gambling echoing through the space. Yu Mo, the leader of the group, catches sight of one of the students observing them, causing the girl to flee in fear. Above, John distributes a pile of flour to the girls, assuring them that they will have bread soon. As the bread bakes, the women in the cellar knock persistently, eager to come out. They finally emerge and gather in the kitchen, adding to the chaotic atmosphere. George, already on edge, becomes infuriated when he discovers the woman indulging in the hidden wine. John's discovery of the wine leads to his flirtation with Yu Mo, who speaks English and facilitates their conversation. The tension and dynamics within the church continue to shift as the night progresses, with John and Yu Mo's interaction adding a new layer to the unfolding drama. Before the night ends, Yu Mo visits John's room upstairs, and John assumes they are about to have sex. He even prepares some money to give her. However, Yu Mo surprises him by earnestly asking for his help to escape Nanking. John initially thinks she is joking, but her serious demeanor makes him realize she is desperate. Frustrated by his reaction, Yu Mo leaves the room. Meanwhile, Major Li forces his way into the church, and George leads him to the cellar. Major Li carries Pu Sheng, who is gravely injured, and gently places him on a bed, explaining that he wants the young soldier to spend his final moments in a warm place. Saddened by the situation, Major Li reflects on Pu Sheng being the youngest among them and the loss it represents. Afterward, Major Li enters a room where the students are praying. He leaves behind a shoe belonging to one of the students, which he had found earlier that day, as a silent gesture of his presence. With a heavy heart, he exits the church, the weight of the ongoing war and the losses it brings evident in his every step. Yu Mo runs to Major Li, pleading for his assistance. They are deep in conversation at the altar when the wind suddenly drops, revealing John watching them from above. As John descends, he taunts Yu Mo, suggesting she refuses him because there is a military military discount for soldiers, not civilians like him. This provokes Major Lee, and a fight breaks out between him and John. The next morning, tensions rise as the students restrict the women from using the bathroom, leading to an argument. One woman, losing her temper, grabs a student's hair, and a fight breaks out. The chaos escalates when the student is shot in the neck and dies, revealing a Japanese raid on the church. Panic spreads as everyone flees. The women rush to the cellar while the girls run upstairs. Amid the turmoil, John dons the priest's clothes. Stepping outside, he yells at the Japanese soldiers, commanding them to stop in a desperate attempt to protect everyone inside. Momentarily halted, the soldiers resume their horrific actions when a leader slices through the Red Cross sign John is holding. The brutality continues unchecked. Outside, Major Lee realizes the dire situation and begins to act. He methodically shoots the soldiers one by one. The Japanese, alarmed by the unexpected attack, rush to locate the shooter. However, Major Lee has a plan. Before they can find him, he plants all his bombs around the area. As the Japanese soldiers closed in, he detonated the bombs, causing massive casualties. Eventually, the Japanese soldiers pinpoint his location and fire at him, causing him to fall from the building. Unbeknownst to them, Major Lee has tied himself to a rope attached to a series of bombs. As he falls, the bombs detonate, resulting in a massive explosion that obliterates the building and kills the remaining soldiers. Hours later, high-ranking Japanese officials arrive at the church. Colonel Hasegawa speaks with John, offering an apology and an explanation for the horrific events. He brings a bag of potatoes as a gesture of goodwill and assures John that their church will now be guarded to prevent any further incidents. Before leaving, Colonel Hasegawa finds the piano and plays a Japanese folk song entitled My Home. Once the Japanese soldiers depart, John, George, and the students solemnly bury the two girls who lost their lives because of the Japanese assault. Inside the church, the women express their sorrow and guilt to the remaining girls, acknowledging that they feel responsible for the deaths. Later in the bedroom, George speaks with John, pleading for him to stay. John, however, insists he cannot remain. This disagreement leads to an argument between the two before George, frustrated and disappointed, leaves the room. However, Pu Sheng regains consciousness, though he is pale and can barely speak. Dao is by his side, playing the pipa and tending to him with care. Meanwhile, a Chinese man posing as a Japanese interpreter enters the church and speaks with Shu. The man is revealed to be Mr. Meng, Shu's father. They converse at the altar while the girls watch. Mr. Meng insists that Shu must leave Nanking to save herself, but Shu refuses, determined to stay with her classmates. When Shu returns upstairs, her classmates accuse her of being a traitor. John, upon learning of Mr. Meng's presence, confronts him. Mr. Ming explains his concern for Shu's safety, and John asks for his help in securing tools to repair a truck for their escape. Later, Yumo and John have another heart-to-heart conversation. Yumo shares her tragic story, revealing that she spent 6 years in a convent until her stepfather raped her when she was 13 years old. This traumatic event led to her becoming a prostitute, forced to serve men and provide them pleasure. Yumo also confides that she once had a crush on a clean-shaven guy, unlike John, who is bearded. Taking this to heart, John shaves his beard to impress her. Meanwhile, Pu Sheng begins to talk incoherently, prompting the women to gather around him, crying as they realize he is dying. Du is particularly affected by his condition. Moments later, Pu Sheng passes away. As John buries Pu Sheng's body, they realize that Du and Lan are missing. They soon discover that Du went out to get new strings for her pipa, wanting to play something beautiful in memory of Pu Sheng, while Lan went to retrieve her earrings from their house. Upon returning inside, John is met by Yu Mo and the other women, who plead with him to go outside and find Du and Lan. Determined to help, John ventures out with George, telling the guards that they are going to get food. While wandering the city, John encounters his friend Terry, who is trying to escape. Terry urges John to join him, but John refuses, unable to abandon the girls at the church. As Du and Lan are about to return, the Japanese soldiers find and start to abuse them. They fight back fiercely, but their resistance leads to their deaths. John stumbles upon their bodies lying on the floor. He takes the pipa strings and earrings and returns to the church, delivering the heartbreaking news to the women. John, overwhelmed with frustration, retreats to his bedroom. Mr. Meng enters John's room, handing over the tools John requested and entrusting the safety of his daughter, Shu, to John. John thanks him before he leaves. Meanwhile, the students sing for Colonel Hasegawa at the altar. After the song, Hasegawa informs them about an upcoming ceremony and invites them to attend. John immediately senses danger, fearing that the invitation is a pretext for further violence or abuse against the girls. Despite his objections, Colonel Hasegawa insists, explaining that the order comes from higher authorities, leaving the girls terrified. Before the Japanese leave, they count the girls and note there are 13, including Mosquito, who should not be there. Shu, fearing the worst, tells the other students to jump off the building to avoid the impending horror. However, John and the women manage to stop them in time. Yumo steps forward and proposes that the women will take the place of the girls at the ceremony. When safety is temporarily restored, The women gather in the cellar to discuss their decision. Yumo speaks, saying they owe their lives to the girls in the convent. She declares that it is time for them to repay that debt, showing their gratitude by protecting the young students from the horrific fate that awaits them. Since it's their profession, the women agree it will be easier for them to carry out the plan. They finally agree and ask John for one last favor. The students give their uniforms to the women, who then alter them using curtains to fit their sizes. Meanwhile, John and George work on fixing the truck, hammering plywood to create a box for hiding wine bottles. In the cellar, the women and students share emotional goodbyes, hugging and assuring each other of their safety. The women begin to sing their traditional song, Qinhuai Riverview, performing it as if it were their final farewell. In a tender moment, John and Yumo find themselves in bed. John does Yumo's makeup and cuts her hair. They kiss and make love. Afterward, John helps transform all the remaining women, preparing them for their mission. The next morning, the women, now in disguise, wake up with mixed feelings of determination and sorrow. George counts them and realizes there are only 12. He sacrifices himself, and John makes a wig for him too. They break pieces of glass and hide the sharp parts in their clothing as weapons against the Japanese. When the Japanese arrive to pick them up, the women begin boarding the truck. Mr. Meng desperately tries to see his daughter, but only sees other girls. When it's Mosquito's turn, she tells the guards she's not a student, but they can't understand her and force her inside. As the truck departs, John rushes inside, and a soldier shoots Mr. Meng. John gathers all the students at the back of the truck, hiding them beneath the wine boxes. They encounter a Japanese checkpoint, but thanks to the permit Mr. Meng provided, they manage to pass after giving the soldiers a box of wine. The movie ends with John driving, looking determinedly ahead as he and the girls leave Nanking, heading toward an uncertain but hopeful future. And with that, the movie ends. We hope you enjoyed our video. Watch the next recaps on the screen and don't forget to subscribe for more amazing recaps. See you in the next one.